In our last section, we looked at hosting containers and Azure Container Instances. In this section, we're going to explore app service plans for hosting our web-based applications. So let's start by understanding what app service plans and web apps are. An app service plan are Azure's Platform as a Service or PaaS offering to host your HTTP-based applications. App service plans are what provide resources to the web apps or the actual applications. One app service plan can host one or more web apps depending on the workload of each web app and the tier of the app service plan. The higher the workload per web app, the lower density of web apps that you can host on your app service plan. The lighter the workload of the web app, the greater density of web apps you can host on a single app service plan. You also have an SLA of 99.95 in most app service plan tiers, the exception being the free and shared tier. Additionally, you can scale out or up automatically to accommodate your workloads. Between the two, this helps ensure your web application should be available for consumption in almost every situation. Additionally, since all code should be stored in some sort of source control, Azure App Services will work with any Git repository in order to support automated deployments. Before we go too much further, let's talk about the type of HTTP-based applications that can be hosted in Azure App Service plans. First and foremost, and probably the most common, is web apps. This is what most would consider a website. This would also include API apps, which are used to host REST APIs. Another very common type is mobile apps. Mobile apps have features built in that make it easy for your mobile app developers to focus on the code rather than worrying about things such as authentication, data access, offline sync, and push notifications. And one that is becoming more and more common is Azure Functions. While the functions do not require an app service plan to run, if you already have one, you can leverage one to host your Azure Functions and make the most use of your existing spend. App service plan features. Since there is a wide variety of workloads, there is also a variety of tiers for hosting your app service plans. This can include anywhere from the free tier that offers some basic features up to an app service environment, which you have a fully isolated and dedicated environment. All app service plans support CI/CD, so you can automate the deployment of your web applications. And similar to Azure Container Instances, App Service will support workloads designed to both run Linux as well as Windows. Additionally, you can also run a container in an app service plan as well. It also supports a wide variety of languages. At the time of this recording, it included many popular languages like ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, and Python. Additionally, you can also create static HTML sites in there. And one of the key advantages of web apps is the ability to authenticate users to a wide variety of third parties, or using Azure Active Directory. Some of these third parties can include Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. One of the most important parts of any web application is the ability to update it over time. There are a variety of ways in which we can push our code up to a web app. These include FTP or File Transfer Protocol. You can deploy from a package. You can use Git, and that's whether it's running local on your workstation or if you're using a repository that stores that code somewhere centrally. And then finally, Cloud Sync, which is either OneDrive or Dropbox. So when you update the code stored in OneDrive or Dropbox, it can then be used to update your web application. One advantage to web apps is deployment slots. And deployment slots give us the ability to have multiple versions of a web app running side by side. We can have our production code running in one deployment slot and be testing the QA code in another deployment slot. Once the QA code has passed all the tests, you can simply swap the slots. So the QA code is now in the production slot. It is now serving revenue generating clients. Since the QA slot was already warm, there's no downtime as you make the transition. Additionally, Azure will ensure that all sessions are gracefully switched over to that new slot. And if we do run into any issues with the new production slot, we can always swap the code back so that our previous version of production was running again and now facing our revenue generating clients. Now let's jump in the portal and create a sample web app. So here we are back in the Azure portal, and you can see again we've got our Skylines resource group opened up. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an app service plan. We're going to set up a web application on it, and we're going to validate everything works like it's supposed to. So to get started, we need to create the app service plan. So to do that, let's go up to our search bar. Let's type app service plan. and we can see we've got our option right there. And if we open it, we can see we do already have one app service plan here. Eng App Service Plan 001. You can also see that the pricing tier is using the shared pricing tier, which we'll talk about here in a second. Like I said, we're going to create a new one. So let's go up here to Add. And then now we've got the very familiar screen. We're going to go ahead and select the resource group of Skylines. Let's give it a name of Skylines ASP01. We are going to set the operating system to be Windows. And again, since this is the underlying resources that are going to be provided to our app service plan, we need to specify the operating system that it's going to be running on. So we'll select Windows. We'll leave it in the default region of Central US, or my default region, I should say, of Central US. And then we can see here now we get to the pricing tier. Let's go ahead and open this up. And let's start by taking a look at the dev test pricing tiers. So you can see we've got our free tier of F1, which has some limited resources available, but gives us the ability to basically have a free website. If we move up to the shared tier, which is what our other app service plan was, you can see here our cost goes up a little bit, but now we get the ability to purchase custom domain names. And if we go up one level to the B1, now Azure is providing information in ACUs, which if we go back to our virtual machines or infrastructure as a service, ACU is how Azure essentially provides a benchmark for how much compute capacity is available for that resource. If we scroll down now, we also notice we get some additional storage. It goes from 1 gig to 10 gigs. And we have the ability to add a custom domain or SSL, as well as the ability to manually scale. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the production workloads now, or production options, I should say. And now you can see not only does our storage go up quite a bit from 100 gigs to 50, or excuse me, from 10 gigs to 50 gigs, we also have the ability to auto scale now. We also have staging slots or deployment slots. And now we get backups as well as traffic manager. So as we move from the dev test to production, our web apps have the features necessary for a true production environment. So let's scroll up again. You can see we've got the various tiers available here. So we've got S1, which, as you can see the specs here, 100 ACU for processing, 1.75 gigabytes of memory, and then it goes up depending upon there. So with that said, let's go ahead and select the default here of S1 for our example. We'll hit apply. And now let's go to tags. We're going to leave those as blank for the time being. Review and create, and then create. So now this is going to run, so it shouldn't take too long, but we'll let this environment spin up here. And once the app service plan is created, then we're going to go ahead and add the web apps to it. So it looks like that's done. Let's click go to resource. So you can see here we've got our app service plan created. You can see we've got 0 apps, 0 slots deployed. If we go to apps, again, we've got no results here. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's type in web apps and select app services. You can see we've got the existing app service or one existing web app that's deployed to that other app service plan that we saw earlier. Let's go ahead and add, and we'll again select the Skylines resource group. Let's call this Skylines Demo Web App. It is going to be running code. Again, we had the option if we wanted to run it as a Docker container, we could, but we'll leave this as code for now. We're going to select our runtime as .NET Core 3.1. And you can see we have the option to choose some of our existing app service plans. Those were created using a Windows app service plan. So if we select the operating system for our web app to Linux, you can see we cannot select our one of the existing app service plans. We have to create a new one. We'll go ahead and change that back to Windows. We'll select the Skylines app service plan. We'll go to monitoring, and here we have the option to create application insights or enable application insights if we like. Let's go ahead and we're going to turn that off for the time being. We have the option to create and assign some tags. We'll leave that blank for the moment. And now we're going to go ahead and review our settings, and then we're going to go ahead and select create. So while this is deploying, what I've done is I've created I've got a Git repository over here that I have a sample web application set up. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And now we'll go back to the portal, give it a moment for our resource to finish deploying, and look at that. So let's go to resource. And you can see here, let's go to our deployment center. And actually, before we do that, you can see our resource here. Let's open up the web page, and you can see there's nothing here. So let's go ahead, or basically it's a filler page, I should say. So let's go to the deployment center. We've got a couple different options for how we can deploy our code. If we're looking at our CI/CD deployment, we can use Azure Repos, GitHub, Bitbucket, or if we've got a local Git we could do that. Since we're using a public Git, we're going to go down to the manual deployment and we're going to select external. So we go ahead and select that, hit continue, and now let's paste our repository value in there. We're going to leave the branch of master. We're going to select the private repository. We'll leave that as no. It is a Git repository, so we'll leave that. We'll hit continue and finish. So now you can see it's going to communicate with that repository, and now it's going to basically look at the last check-in that was done at that repository, and it's going to pull that code in and then build that site within the web app using .NET Core 3.1, since that is a runtime that we chose when we created our web app. And now after a little while, we can see that it is now active. So let's go back to the home page, or let's go back to the app service plan. Let's go ahead and select that URL. Perfect. Now we validated that our web app's up and running. Let's jump back into the slides and take a closer look at some of the options available within the web app.